Welcome to Between Two Molars, an open conversation of the wins, setbacks, and messy middle of business ownership. A new kind of podcast that pulls back the curtain. No fluff, real conversations, real lessons, and the real life of running an orthodontic practice. So sit back between two molars and let's get into it. Welcome to Between Two Molars, the space where real orthodontic conversations happen.
I'm Diana Weaver.
And I'm Michelle Shimmin. Together, we're diving into real-life challenges and wisdom from inside the orthodontic practice.
It's time to talk between two molars.
Today's a really great topic. It's something that we deal with weekly in our coaching sessions, but we're going to talk about the authority balance.
So how to be both approachable and respected by your team.
And so this really comes with doctors to team members. It comes with associates and team members, leads to doctors, leads to team members, really any of the inner office communication. We say all the time, it doesn't matter the position you have in the practice, you all have the ability to be a leader. So how can we empower team members to really be able to be a strong, confident, effective leader, but do it with clarity and to be able to find that balance and develop respect?
Well, we talk about all the time expectations. Expectations are really important. Expectations are important for the associate, understanding what your what your doctor owner is looking for, the expectations that the team needs from your office manager or the leadership in the practice. Those expectations are important to know that we have consistency across the practice.
And that's the clarity that we talk about as well. I want to touch on the fact that kindness in leadership does not negate authority. You can be a kind, respectful leader to team members, and if you have the clarity or those expectations have been set clearly, then team members know how to fit within those parameters, and a strong leader can still be kind yet authoritative at the same time. And I see a lot of confusion in that, a balance or an imbalance in people thinking they have to be kind because they have to be liked, but then they don't know how to balance that with authority as well.
Well, because when there's a lack of consistency in between, what those different people are in your practice, that can erode what your authority is. So you can still be in their roles,
right.
And the clarity that you talked so much about earlier. That lack of consistency, I think, is oftentimes not always. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not always
consistent throughout. Like you'll have it. After a business meeting, they'll go in with great intentions. They'll create clear expectations and deadlines and what we call agreements, but then you don't have consistency throughout the weeks and the months after that.
Or even not even consistency in between the team members. So there might have been like a legacy team member that you treat perhaps a little bit differently unknowingly. I think a lot of that is unconscious, right? So it could be that legacy team member, or it could be the star of the show for your practice, and
isn't held to the same
standards, or maybe they get away with a little bit more than maybe somebody else.
And when that happens, there is a lot of, it actually erodes the culture in the practice because it facilitates resentment. So I'm going to summarize the first part of this. Arrogance and pride in leadership is going to erode respect. We always want to influence and empower our leaders to invite others on a journey and not dictate that journey. But then also a lack of clarity and consistency is going to erode the culture within that practice. So I think that those are really good bullet points to remember, that kindness and respect in your communication and in your leadership does not negate authority.
That's right.
And when you can provide clarity in roles, this is why we love org charts. it doesn't matter the size of the practice, but to have an org chart to be able to understand each team member's position and place within the flow of the practice, and then also that channel of communication. And in that, you create that channel of expectation. And we are using the word clarity a lot because we observe a lot of misinterpretation, or a lot of team members in their communication bring their own perception. And so if you don't have clarity in those channels of expectation, you're going to lose out on the high level of accountability, the effective leadership, and really the ultimate success in what the practice is going to be able to achieve.
Can we talk a little bit more about the org chart? Because I love, we implement organizational structures in communication all the time in practices. It's a really great way for the team members to understand who to go to for what things, so that not everything's channeling and funneling directly to the doctor. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the doctor's unavailable to set those expectations, but it gives the team members that understanding and that clarity of who to go to for what things.
And it's not just your favorite person or the
Right.
easiest person in the practice for you to communicate with.
That's right.
We see that a lot. Obviously, team members become very close to each other, and communication or going to the team members that you're comfortable with is easier.
Well, because you can overshare some things, right?
That is something that we always want to make sure that we create boundaries around as well. Too friendly versus familiar. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to go back to the org chart that you were talking about. This is something like we say all the time, it does not matter the number of team members you have or the size. Obviously, if you have multiple doctors, multiple locations, 20, 30 or more team members, an organizational chart is mandatory. It's absolutely necessary. But even the smaller practices that 5, 6, 7, 8 different team members in one location, an organizational chart is a great visual for the team members to not only know what responsibility fits into their lane or their bucket, but to know their channel of communication. And that is really important to help relieve a lot of the nuances and unnecessary conversations or questions getting to the doctor that can get really heavy. They're really, really unnecessary. I remember a team member going to a doctor asking what font they should order on a name tag. And the doctor, it was the middle of the afternoon. It was just a heavy, stressful time. And the doctor's like, that's not something I care about. But by the time...
need to be worrying about.
Or need to be worrying about.
Right.
By the time that was her, the team member was trying to please the doctor, was trying to do what the doctor expected and wanted and just do everything right, and felt hurt to get that response. And it could have been completely avoided if we simply would have understood the channels of necessary communication, where the necessary approval comes from, and then what and when it gets to the doctors. But you did touch on too friendly versus familiar. Sure. And in leadership, finding that balance so that you don't overshare and provide too much information and information that shouldn't be shared because we're too friendly. That is a balance that is required to find in leadership as well. Again, you can be familiar. It is imperative that you can recognize how to be friendly and familiar without oversharing. Leadership is harder and less effective when you personalize situations that should remain professional. And I see that struggle between leaders, between doctors and team members. I see it a lot between female doctors. Obviously,
because they want to be friends.
They want to be friends. They want to be liked. Mm-hmm. And obviously our industry, the team members are heavy female within our industry. And when you then have a female orthodontist, that's a balance that we observe often as a struggle within practices. So remain friendly, obviously, remain familiar, but find that balance to where you're not oversharing. And it's really important that you remain professional. Again, I'm not removing the word friendly. We're friendly, we're kind, we're familiar, but we're remaining professional in the process. And that professionalism and those conversations should always align with employee policies, handbooks, and protocols, and not go outside of that. The minute we go outside of that, those protocols, policies, the employee handbook, the team members lose direction. They are no longer grounded because the targets are moving.
And there's no accountability in those. You've got accountability pieces that are surrounding what your employee handbook is like. I have to share a story because this topic reminds me a lot of me being a mom, and you can't blur those lines between your parent relationship and your child relationship. And I know I've shared this with you before, but our daughter, who's 9, I'm not the cool mom. I am the authority mom. And so I have to understand that you can't blur those lines all the time. I can be friendly, I can be familiar, we can do fun things, but I'm also her parent. You can be friendly, you can be familiar. I'm also your boss. That part of not blurring the lines is really important.
That's a great story. I see a lot of parents trying to be friends. And we, by any means, are not, associating a parent-child relationship with leadership and team members. But that relationship in not blurring lines, keeping it professional, keeping it familiar and kind, but not oversharing or overstepping. And I have seen this in practices that when you overshare and you overstep, you invite team members to place judgment. I once had a doctor that was, on vacation and was sharing everything about what was going on this vacation. And at the same time, the team members were really struggling in the office in keeping up with their work and all the tasks that were assigned as before the doctor went on vacation. And because there was so much oversharing and those lines were blurred between friendship and employee
relationships,
boss, employer-employee relationships, the team members at one point would come back and say, well, you're just sitting on the beach all day and we're the ones struggling with what we're dealing with in the practice. So when those lines are blurred, we essentially invite people in to place judgment over what choices we're making as business owners and leaders.
It also makes it very difficult and challenging whenever you are a leader and you have those blurred lines, and now you have to implement the policy or hold a team member accountable. And how do you stay calm in those situations while you're delivering this perhaps uncomfortable information to the team member, but it's a necessary thing. When you have that stronger when you have those blurred lines, it makes that calm sense a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult.
Or if you've blurred the lines and you then have to redirect a team member through a performance redirection, you don't often have the same authority in that space as well. So we've shared a lot of examples on the importance of not blurring those lines with oversharing too much information or information that's inappropriate or information that would invite somebody to place judgment on what choices you make in your life outside of the office and outside of the policies within the practice. But I want to touch on again the policies and employee handbooks, team agreements are really important in leadership and holding teams and people accountable. Because if we can remove perception, remove feelings, and have our goals, have our policies in place, and discuss these and agree that yes, that's something that we can commit to, now you have something to hold somebody accountable to, because those are mutual agreements that we have made. And so with those agreements, that's then what you get to revisit and be able to hold people accountable to. And that you don't have to worry about any blurred lines or a lack of clarity in what's expected, because we've gone over it very clearly. And that's the whole purpose of an employee handbook.
Right.
I was working with a practice that was wanting to implement an employee handbook, and every team member I would go to and ask about a specific, it was a section within that handbook, and I would say, tell me your understanding of this and your interpretation of this. You tell me what this is. And this was after 2 different full team meetings explaining it, and every single team member interpreted it very differently. And so it was because there had been a lot of changes made with it. There wasn't any final version that was put down on the desk in front of every team member that every team member would read through and initial and recognize and agree to. So we talk a lot about clarity. That's an example of what clarity and expectations are when we're talking about effective leadership. So be careful. You can be friendly. You can be familiar. Don't overshare, especially around your personal life and what's going on with your personal life. We can be friends, but make sure that you find that balance, that you don't invite that judgment. And then with the team members that you're really comfortable and familiar with in the practice, that you may be close friends with outside of the practice, make sure that you don't cross the lines when you walk into the office, because that can really erode away at a culture as well.
So yes. So also let's go back to the staying confidence in that clarity. So I think that's kind of the final point I'd like to touch on is
that calm confidence.
That calm confidence. Mm-hmm. Yes. So if we've done all the steps that we've talked about, if we've created the clarity, if we've got our handbooks and policies, if we've come up with our agreements, and now we do need to hold this team member accountable for whatever reason, that confidence that the leadership has, we have backed up with all of these other points, right? So our steadiness, our emotions, we can remove out of that situation so that we're not minimizing the authority that we have.
Emotional intelligence, a high emotional intelligence is key in this space. And you said less reactive. So often when something is brought to our attention, or when we have to redirect or hold somebody accountable that isn't matching the agreements that we had, emotions can rise. And it's something that if we don't have the emotional intelligence to manage our emotions, we are less effective and things can escalate very quickly. So I loved that you said, to be able to not be so responsive. I'm going to give everybody permission here. If somebody brings something to you that you haven't been expecting, or it's a question, or it's a problem, or an issue, it's okay for you to say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Give me some time to chew on this, or let this resonate with me for a minute. Can we revisit this today at 4 p.m. or tomorrow at lunch? It's okay to ask permission for a moment to absorb the information and to come up with a strategic response and solution that's not reactive.
I think the key with that, though, Shell, is the setting the timeline. So it can't be, let's revisit this tomorrow, or let's revisit this in a week.
Or later.
Because that interpretation is very different. Later to you might mean later today. Later to me might mean in an hour from now.
Yeah.
So being very specific on your time frame, what you shared, is really important as well, so that the team member understands that you are valuing what they brought to the table and that you're taking that under strong consideration.
And that contributes to an increase in building trust in this leader's effectiveness, because they heard the team member, they will put momentum in place, and they will commit to what that is. I'm glad that you pointed that out. So yes, it's okay to be able to ask for time, quantify when that time is, and stick to that, commit to that. And that will continue to build trust in your leadership ability with those around you. So we talked a lot about how we can provide clarity and expectations that deliver the highest level of accountability. We talked about not crossing or blurring the lines between oversharing, and how we can build trust within our leadership and within our communication. I'm going to say it again because it's so important. It doesn't matter the position that you have within the practice. We all have the ability to be a leader. So if you are in a position of leadership or management in a practice, these tools are very, very effective and will elevate your ability. If you have a position in the practice that is not a formal management position, be an example, lead by example, serve others outside of your position. really learn and grow in your level of communication with the team members, and you will grow and develop trust around you. And that combination, that recipe, really does facilitate an effective culture within practices. And every team member is a participant in that.
Yes.
So, what a great topic.
It's a great topic. So thanks for joining us on Between Two Molars. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep smiling.
And don't forget to please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you back here between two molars.